It's Jason and Doug, and if you did not hear, Georgia, the state of Georgia, not just Atlanta, but the state of Georgia has announced that some salons can open with restrictions as soon as this Friday. And Doug and I wanted to jump on real quick and talk about what does that mean for you, because whether you live in Georgia or not, if you're a salon owner, you might want to pay attention to what's going on in Georgia, because that may be very similar to what's going on for you in your states. Do me a favor, type in what state you are on the line from and you are watching from, because we'll talk about that as best we can. But Doug, this is good news that people are talking about reopening salons and allowing people to go back into salons, yeah?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just going to get to the point of, how do we navigate that opening? I think everybody's got an idea, but now that we're getting so this is some rock solid recommendations from a state board on what to do. It doesn't mean every state's going to be the same, but right. We're starting to get an idea for it and feel for it. And I think it's important to understand how to read through this. Because I've heard people look at it a couple different ways and kind of went into some panic mode on the size of it. But when you read it, it's really, it makes sense. Yeah. And I think most of them are. So I think being able to understand how to do that's super important.
And I also want to say this, because I know as soon as we say salons are reopening, the very first thing that half the world is saying in panic mode is like, is it really okay? Is it safe to reopen? And I just want to state this up front for the record, is that this varies state by state, country by country. And when your country is adequately prepared, trust the people that are around you to make that decision on when it's safe to reopen. And I also want to say this too, if you decide it's cool for you to be closed beyond what the state recommends, this is completely your choice. Doug and I just want to give people the information, and we're going to actually review what Georgia said specifically during this video and do our best to kind of rip through it with you and just see how to read it, how to interpret it, and how to go through it. So let's go ahead and pull this up, Doug. And you guys, if you want to see this post, you can go on to our Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/highperformancesalon. I put this up just last night after this was announced, and so you can do it. If you've seen this, do me a favor and say seen it. And it looks like we have people on from Jersey, Texas, Kansas, California, New York, North Carolina. So you guys are from all over. So this is going to be really helpful for you no matter if you're in the U.S. or internationally. This is just really helpful for you to do. So Doug, how do we read this? Because I think you said there's two things, right? There's restrictions and then there's recommendations. Let's talk about those two things and what they really mean as we talk about this.
Right. So whenever it says should consider or we recommend or have a high, so there's things in here that everything isn't a must. It's like you should consider for your space. I mean, how big of a hot zone are you in? I think the bigger hot zone you're in, then probably you should really seriously consider more of those things that are said to be considered.
Right.
You've got to look and yes, it's funny, the governor of Georgia, I heard him say he was being interviewed about something, and they were like, the question of safety. And he's like, have you been in a grocery store lately?
Yeah.
It's like most of it's going to be a lot safer than what's going on in a lot of grocery stores.
Totally. Yeah.
So here I say, being smart about how you do it. We already had a plan. We felt pretty good. We're in Florida. I felt pretty good that most of our plan was incorporated in this. One of the things that they recommend as to the point of should consider, one of the things they say they should consider is providing masks for their clients. Well, we're not considering that. We're doing that.
Right.
So we're going to require that a client comes in with a mask, or we will have a mask they can wear. But they have to understand our masks their cloth masks are going to be reusable. After each use, they're going to be sanitized, laundered, and brought back out. So if they're not okay with that, they need to bring their own covering because that really helps the 6 foot social distancing. Mm-hmm. If both people are wearing a mask, so nothing's really escaping and traveling that 6 foot distance anymore. So go ahead.
So let's get into this because I want to make sure we get this post as deep as we can, and I want you guys to hear this because Doug and I have really talked about like what this is and what it means a lot. And I'm going to skim this, but please go through and read it. And I want you to see it does say guidance on preparing your workplace. It's a guide for reopening. This is not because again it's a long post from Georgia, and again, a lot of you guys have been sharing it and talking about it, so thank you for that. Hopefully, this will provide more insights in there. So it says, asking people if making sure that if anybody, it says any employee or client who had a temperature above 99 degrees should be sent home immediately and not allowed to return. But notice It does say should. Obviously, I don't want somebody in the salon who's got a temperature or an employee who's got a temperature. So being aware of that. It says ask your client. And again, I would recommend you do this before they come in. Say, look, as we are going to reopen, here are some of the things, like preface them. Give them information about their appointments and say, if we're going to ask you these when you come in, make sure they're not showing up for their appointment after they've been gone for whatever. People are desperate to come in the salon. Be aware of saying these are important in advance.
Yeah, I think this on your social media, this is a good thing to put out there. Say, look, and consider, in order, because of what's going on, in order to have a safe environment for everybody involved, if any of these things are going on, please be a good citizen and let us know so that we can reschedule you. Because if you ask somebody as soon as they're walking in the salon, have you had this, this, and this lately? The answer is going to be no, because no, I want to get my damn hair done.
Right.
So I think putting it ahead of time and putting it on, trying to help everybody stay safer. That these things, then they don't drive all the way to the salon and then say, okay, you can't come in. But we are going to do temperature checks. I think that's a good valid, because you can't lie about a temperature.
Right. And by the way, I just want to say, people asked, they said, where's this from? This is not like Doug and I made this up. This is from the Georgia State Board of Cosmetologists and Barbers. This is not like Doug and Jason's personal recommendations. We're just talking about our perception of this, what you need to do. So it does say, are you living with somebody sick or quarantine? Again, temperature checks. And again, it's talking about getting an infrared thermometer. You can do a temperature check of not only your staff in the morning, but of guests. And as crazy as that sounds, it might be worth it for you if you're in another state that might not open for a while to start seeing if you can source something like this. Because again, sourcing masks, sourcing, coverings, these are going to be things you're going to have to really deal with. So let's take these on kind of one by one here, Doug. It says limit the people in the shop or salon. They should consider seeing the clients by appointment only, online scheduling, limit the number of people in the area or shop. It's recommended, again, not required, but recommended that clients wait outside the shop and in their vehicle. You mentioned about masks. So you want to talk about masks versus distancing for a second?
Yeah, so if both people are wearing masks, then it reduces the need for social distancing. The social distancing, that if you don't know, it's because the water particles or moisture that can come out just from speaking can travel up to 6 feet. So if you're 6 feet or more away, then your chances of that traveling to you is very low. So both people, very important, both people are wearing a mask, then if they have the virus, it can't travel but to here and maybe out the sides.
Right. It greatly reduces it when both people wear masks.
And so both people wearing masks, because you're going to be in close contact. Both people should be wearing a mask. They also put a recommendation in here about a face shield. If you're more comfortable with a face shield and a mask, then by all means, we are going to have our aesthetics department are going to have the face shields, because they're right there, and it's hard for the client to have a face mask on while they're getting a aesthetic service.
Right.
So it's like you just be thinking through it, because you want your staff to be safe, you want your clients to be safe, you want everybody to feel good about the experience.
Right.
So I do think on social media, to get ahead of it, you put out as much when you get from your state, you find out what the regulations are going to be. Put as much of that out so they're prepared ahead of time.
Right.
You don't want to hit people walking through the door with all this stuff.
Yeah.
I've no idea.
And just know, we've talked about, ways to reopen, and we're going to do another video about, kind of like Doug and Jason's recommendations on what you need to do to get your staff ready, because these are the things that we're talking about that are, restrictions and requirements. There's a whole nother series we're going to do on just information on, what do you need to do to make sure your staff is ready and they're prepared for it. I know there's a ton of questions coming in, so let's keep going. It does say, and I want you guys to see, this says social distancing. But notice it says except when staff are servicing clients. But it says things like, salons and shops should not be used as social gathering places, right? This isn't like hang out at the salon for an indefinite amount of time. Like it's trying to say, look, come to get your service, right?
I mean, there's a place in here where it says get rid of your magazines. We had already done that, but if you haven't done that, you need to get rid of all that stuff. Mm-hmm. Magazines in the waiting room are probably a thing of the past. Mm-hmm. So. Because that's the people are touching them and handling them back and forth. That shouldn't happen.
Right. Yeah. So again, employees can wear masks. Doug said you're going to be providing masks, but reusable masks for guests. Roy on here says, how can you do hair with a guest wearing a mask? I mean, I don't do hair, but I feel like when you have a mask that goes around people's ear, Roy, I feel like that's something that's still very doable. So, we're not talking about a full face covering here. We're talking about just around their face.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, you got to think about the type of mask, one that goes around the ear, not one that ties in back.
Right. Important detail.
Right.
Yeah.
So the style that your staff is going to wear may be different than the style, because we're going to have the ones with the little push button that pulls tight.
Right.
So they're not having to tie a knot or anything, but they're also not going to have that behind their ears all day.
Totally.
Because having that elastic behind your ears all day could be a source of irritation. A client there for just an hour or two, that would be fine. And that they have the option of bringing their own.
Yeah.
But we are going to require to be in the building. You're going to have a face covering.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best things that you can do, in my opinion, to control things, is if everybody's wearing a mask, and because it's just close proximity right now.
Yeah. And I just want to say this too, because I know a lot of you guys are panicking about this. I'm seeing it in the chat. People are like, but what about this? What about this? Just look, take a deep breath, read through this stuff and really see it, because it does talk about wearing gloves, when servicing clients, capes. Each client should be draped with a clean cape and should be laundered following the recommendations between visits. So this is not reusing capes.
Anyway.
Say it again, Doug.
I said that one should be happening anyway.
Anyway, right. And again, this is a good time to talk about barbicide certifications and all those things. Like, go back and make sure your team is up on all of the safety precautions and recommendations. I'm seeing a lot of questions flowing in about the legal liabilities, about what's going on. Look, if you want to get into liabilities, that's an attorney or an insurance type question of what is going on. So I think it's just, something you got to pay attention to.
And I think it goes back into just like you operating right now is because you're operating according to your Board of Cosmetology for your state.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you are operating according to the Board of Cosmetology in your state, you're fine. That's the legal setup that your insurance is based on now, is that you're following state regulations.
Mm-hmm.
They put state regulations, follow them. That's why they put them out there and they give you guidance. They said, this is the way. You check with your insurance agency if you want to. But as long as if you're going to be rogue and come up with your own stuff, then yeah, you might, be in a little bit of trouble.
Yeah.
But that's why they're giving guidance. That's why they're putting the things out there to say these are must and these are highly recommended.
Totally. A couple other things that are in here, and we'll just spend a few more minutes on this, and hopefully you guys will go read the post again. Go to facebook.com/highperformancesalon. It'll be one of the last couple of posts that you guys get there. I think it's really, really important. It talks about neck strips, protective neck strips around the neck of each haircut client, hand washing, making sure that it's minimum 20 seconds. Again, this is stuff that should be being done anyway. Employee clothing should arrive at the shop showered. This is an important detail, Doug. I think that having your staff there showered and wearing clean clothes, that would probably be a good thing anyway. But should change clothes before entering and exiting, or when they go back home.
Right. That was the practice that a lot of, especially the ones that had children, or live with other people, or live with it. They go home, immediately take your clothes off, take a shower, and put your clothes in the laundry.
Totally.
Or put them in a bag, so then wherever you do laundry. But that is a very good practice. Leaving your shoes outside, spraying them with Lysol or something before you come in. Just being aware, I think, is super important.
Yeah. It also says on here, make sure you're using disinfectants. And this is why we're talking about this, is it says, you're going to have to source these things before you open. And if Georgia opens this Friday, look, they're going to have a whole lot of things they have to do. We have some salons in our High Performance Salon Academy that are in the Georgia area. And they're like, look, we probably can't open Friday. We're going to have to wait till early next week before we can reopen, because we have to gather all of these things, which is why we're giving you in other states. And again, do me a favor and say what state you're on from. This really helps to just give you some framework and information. We don't have time to go through this whole thing today, but I want you to go through it. And I think the best piece of advice we could just give you as you go through this, because again, we're just going through this and saying, look, read through and see what's a requirement, read through and see what's a recommendation, and take a deep breath before you go through this whole thing and really just freak out from it. Just know that there are some really incredible things that you can learn from just going through this document and seeing what other states are doing, and state by state, this will vary. Doug, anything you want to say? Because we wanted to point you guys to this post to go read it and observe it.
Best thing to do is to get the post, highlight for your area. When you get yours, highlight the must-dos, and then highlight the suggestions that I want to do. And the rest of it, that way you get clarity of what you have to do and then what you want to do. Totally. And maybe they got some really good ideas that will help you. But that way you're calmer when you're in the know, you're less calm when you're in the unknown.
Yeah. So if you guys want more information like this, do me a favor and just share it. Hopefully this, our take on it has been helpful, but also you guys going through it and digesting it with your staff, and just go through it piece by piece. Try to look at it from a frame point of like not panicking about it and being stressed about all these things. Say, look, what is it that we already should be doing anyway? What can we do to upgrade and operate in a high level so that we can keep people feeling safe? And what are the things that we can do to make sure that we're doing the best that we can with what we have and being able to digest that information? Doug, any last tips you want to give for salons as they're going through this information so you read it correctly?
I think the best thing is to look. It's going to start opening up. So do it the smartest way. Do it the calmest way. Because the better prepared your clients are, your staff are, the more information that's out there, the more conversations you're having, the better the whole thing's going to go. Don't wait and just see what happens. That's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, get ready now and be prepared, and again, decide what you're looking for. So go check out the post. We'll talk more about our recommendation on that later this week. We want to at least get you that information and give you some good framework on how to read it. All right, Doug, thanks for being on with me real quick this morning to do our quick piece. All right, thanks, guys. Bye for now. See ya.